Yeah, but
Oh.
try to keep in mind that some of us are trying to sleep.
I know you are. Testing. All right, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me back. This is the second time I've come to speak to the Transit Coalition, so thank you for the freebie, for the lunch, and thank you for the invite back. Bart mentioned a little bit of my experience. I think your coalition is something that we as a Metro appreciate, because you help advocate certain things that we need help with sometimes. I worked with Tom Rubin in the past, Arnold. I see some very seasoned people here that have a lot of experience. And you know, I was here for 22 years previously, and I left for 10 years. No, I wasn't in jail. I worked at different properties. But coming back to Metro, like Art Lighting has, gives me a totally different perspective of what the good things we're doing here and some things that we can improve on. So, and also in returning to Metro, many people have retired and moved on. So we've lost a lot of valuable people, valuable knowledge. So anyway, I think one of the questions that we had as a topic was, what are some of the challenges that we're facing here with Metro, and as well as what I'm doing now. It'll be 2 years since I've been back to Metro in January 10th. And I was here again 22 years previously, and I left in 2000 and went to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where we started the Hiawatha Light Rail line in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then I was out there for 2 years, and it was 2 winters and 3 springs. And very, very different climate out there and other things. But it was a good experience because I was able to get involved with the design of the project, working with consultants, working with different unions, different work rules, and the way they operate their agency is quite different from what we do here. We're a rapid system, so to speak. Over there it's a little slower. So I was out there, had some good experience. Came back to California, and as some people call it, I went to the dark side. I worked for the private sector, the contractor, and our company actually was joint venture to deliver the goal line to Metro, so I was able to come back and see a couple of friends. And then our company also got the East Side extension. So I was basically hired as a rail operations system starter for those 2 projects. After doing that for 6 years and worrying about whether I was going to go to Houston next or New Jersey or whatever, I paired up with an old friend. His name was John Bird, and he actually helped us learn how to operate the railroad here many years ago for the red line and the blue line. Anyway, I paired up with him, went up to Uni, and was up there for about 2 years. And working at Uni, wow, what an experience that was. At the time, it was very challenging, and we could read through that word challenging. We talk about not having the money to do so many things. We were short of vehicles, we were short of operators, the infrastructure was very old, the track, the signal system. It was a struggle just to put the service out there every day. What did I learn from that? Well, when I came back to Metro, that helped me foresee things that we were probably going to fall into if I didn't make some decisions and changes that I thought we would have made. So I've been in my position right now as a Chief Operations Officer for Metro. And I've been in this position for 6 months. And I worked with Art Leahy in the past, and we kind of have a similar background when we were both operators. I was operator for 6 years, worked as a supervisor, manager on the bus transportation side of RTD and Metro, and then went over to the rail side of Metro in '91 and for about 9 years. Worked various positions. So I'm an ops guy, like our CEO, and so he asked me to come back, which I was glad that he asked me, and I did come back. So, what are we facing? What are the challenges? We got so many things going on in Metro, so many good things. We got many rail projects on the table. We've got the bus division that we're building. We've got new buses that are coming, new train cars. It's boomtown. I think somebody mentioned it earlier that 10 years ago we were much smaller. When I came back, I saw the explosion of rail. I mean, it's just tremendous how much growth we've had in 10 years. So the challenges, one of the challenges is keeping up with all the things we have on our plate. The other challenge is trying to improve what we're doing right now. And I think our current CEO and myself are very, very sensitive to the customer's needs. Our CEO rides the system quite a bit on the weekends, during the week, and he'll send emails 24/7 about things that affect the customer. We talk about connections and other things that, station's dirty, the clock's not reading the right time, et cetera, et cetera. And that's good, because we need to have that feedback. I do the same thing. I go out there, I see all kinds of things that need to be, improved. So, we talk the same talk. You're right, I am not involved in everything with Metro, but I can tell you that for the operations and the maintenance and the service delivery, that is my responsibility. So right now we have some challenges with trying to reduce accidents on bus, trying to reduce accidents on rail, dealing with some issues, as you probably seen in the Times, about the junction where the Expo and the Blue Line interface. We have some old train cars that we're supposed to have a midlife overhaul, but certain decisions were made in the past. We were supposed to get new cars to replace those cars, and that didn't happen in a timely manner. So we are going to get new cars. Kinky Sherry was our recommended car builder, which was approved by the board. So I'm very happy about that. I think they're going to deliver a good car. One of the things that made them stand out amongst the other bidders was, I'm glad everybody sees it, they've never been late with any car contract that they received or got awarded. Unbelievable. So we're happy they're on board. The base buy is 78 cars that we're going to get, and we also have options to exercise to replace the entire fleet, which is what we're probably going to do. So that's what's happening on the rail side. We also have new buses are coming in right now that we're commissioning and sending out to the bus division, so you'll probably see some new buses out there if you haven't already. BART has been very, I'm glad that I partnered up with BART, because a couple of the things that he mentioned that we need to improve connections. Our CEO has the same vision. That we're not just Metro. We're Metro, we're Amtrak, we're Metrolink, we're all the munis. We need to think beyond our own fence, so to speak, and how can we make the customers ride from one mode or one agency to the other? How can that be a little more seamless and better for the customer? So that's what we're doing now. We have partnered up with Metrolink. When they have problems, we provide buses. So we're getting there. It's going to take a while. Any questions so far? Yes.
About how much do the cars cost, the new ones you guys are buying? Like per car is like 10 million or?
I don't remember.
That's okay.
$29.95. That's what they're trying.
10% discount. We bought them on Tuesday.
Is that just the light rail fleet replacement, or is it for the subway cars too?
Yeah, that's just for light rail. Now, we are going to be putting up something to replace our heavy rail vehicles. So that's a need due to the west side extension. And then also we're going to rehab the existing fleet. So there's a lot of capital projects we have on the table. And we're in pretty good shape as far as money. We just need to spend the money. So that sometimes is a challenge. Yes, sir.
What is the issue on the blue line in the expo? I mean, what's happening with the junction? What's the problem?
Okay, well, there's two separate issues. I think we talked about this a little bit before. The way the track was designed and built, we had some problems once it got installed. I don't want to get too technical, but when the train is transitioning from one track to the other, it goes through some switches, and then there's some frogs, which keeps the wheels in line with the crossover move, so to speak. That's not right. Then you have a couple of things that can happen. One is that you can actually derail, and what was happening was it was picking one of the frog things. Picking means it was hitting it, so it created some damage. So luckily we didn't derail, but it was not right. So Expo put a modification to what they call a lip on the frog, which is just you're kind of putting a little piece of metal where you show the wheels in, so it ensures that it takes that path through the frog without picking the point. Now in doing that, you're kind of forcing the wheel over, so it's showing a lot of it's showing excessive wear in some parts of the track work. So the CPC got involved with that, as well as ourselves and others, and they put a lot of the CPC required a lot of inspection and twice a week inspection of the track, ultrasonic testing of the track work to see if there are any cracks within that track structure that was naked to the eye. Monthly reports on any excessive wear and tear on the vehicle. So we're complying with all of that right now. And but we are required by the CPC to improve so it doesn't show all that wear and tear that it's showing right now. And it's also at the 10 miles per hour that we had the authorized speed to go north and southbound through that, I should say southbound move and northbound move for the blue line, we had to reduce the speed because of the issues with the traffic. So bottom line is that the CPC required us to get an expert, to select a track expert to come and evaluate the junction track work and come up with some recommendations. They just finished that preliminary draft report. They'll be finalizing it, and there'll be some modifications to the track work to reduce the excessive wear and tear in the track structure and prevent any picking up frog tanks.
Well, basically, was it installed wrong or designed?
That's to be continued. The other problem that we had, I think it was a week ago, is that junction we added automatic train protection for that junction. That's a positive train control system. So that is there to prevent any train from colliding with each other. So if something's not kosher, our system's fail safe, and they stop the trains. And then we have manual procedures to get the train through the junction safely, which takes a lot of time. So there was a failure of the train control system that we had, and we had to send people out there trying to figure out what it was, and then we're still working on that. So two separate issues. So we think we have a good path forward to fix the junction track work, and the other problem that we have, we're still investigating as far as what actually happened when it needs to be fixed. So all I can say is it's safe. We are operating at a safe speed, everything's safe. But the more gizmos you have, the more things can not work right, and then it causes delays. So we are, what I learned from Muni is, because Muni was an old system, we had a lot of problems with the train control system, a lot more than here. And the train cars were much older and a lot more problematic because they were Breda cars, not to knock Breda, right? But they had stairs that would be like the bus stairs, to get on, because they had low-level stations out in the street. And then they would fold up for the high platform stations within the tunnel. So that's a unique feature to that particular rail car. So what they had to do was they had to throw all these mechanics out there to fix the trains as they broke down. So we're kind of cloning that a little bit because of the problems we're having with the older vehicles. We have more people out there to react. Vehicle failures, system failures, etc. I hope that answers your question. I know it took an hour to answer, but oh well.
I could answer it for another 10 minutes if you want.
No, I got the mic. Yes, sir.
You said that the options for the new vehicles could replace the whole. You said it could replace the whole fleet. So are you including the Nippon and the Siemens?
Yeah. The entire fleet.
The entire fleet.
Yeah, inclusive of the Breda cars, if that's our option to exercise. Right now, the projects are kind of funded to include some vehicles, which is the Foothill and the Expo line. So as we commission the vehicles, those will go first to those two projects, or extensions, as it should say, and then the other cars will be, divvied up between the
Obviously, everybody here is very supportive of transit, and we're disappointed that Measure J didn't pass. But you made a comment just a few minutes ago that there's so much going on already, and this is such boom town. It gave me a little bit of pause that maybe we weren't really ready to digest everything that we've already got started, plus a much more accelerated schedule right now. So maybe it's not the end of the world that we're not dumping all of this on at the same time.
Yeah, there's I remember when I was on this kind of on the contractor side, I don't know if you remember this, we were waiting for information whether we got the contract or not. So we're all in this room waiting eagerly, and then here comes the fellow that's going to give us a message. He says, "Hey, what happened?" He says, "I got good news and bad news." What do you want to hear first? Good news. We got the job. What's the bad news? We got the job. So, we've got a lot on our plate right now. We had pre-planned thoroughly how we would handle if Measure J would pass, as far as staffing, resources, positions, etc., etc. That directive was given to us by the CEO months ago. He said, "Get ready, because if this happens, we need to have a plan to implement and get approval from the board, etc., etc." So right now, what we have and what we're handling, I think we're doing quite well. Any other
You
questions?
can also still pass if there's a supermajority. So-
Very close, right?
Well,
No, they officially certified that it did not pass.
Oh, they did?
It was only half of a percentage point off.
so it wasn't a supermajority then?
It's like 66.2.
No, I'm
In your newsletter on page, whatever page this is, page 5, you can see the final, it was 66.11%.
What I'm saying is that in Congress, they might drop it down like school bonds at 55% if there's a supermajority of Democrats.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I can explain that since it's a side piece and probably needs to be explained, because the Times interviewed me about it today. There's two things. The local tax measures throughout the state to fund transit in different counties have this high mountain to surpass, which is 66.67%. In Oakland, where it probably, I don't know whether it's more controversy or not, because Tom would know more about Oakland, but they had a sales tax measure there at the same time that Metro lost by 0.5%. I think Oakland lost by 1.5%. Is that close?
Less. There's actually a partial recount going on right now. But frankly, my information, it's unlikely that it will result in victory. But it's actually, it failed by less than Measure J did.
So why are school bonds?
I'll explain. Let Tom finish that. Anyway, so what's going on, the difficulties within the state, there's different places like San Jose that have had difficulty getting to the 66 2/3. Sometimes they've passed it, sometimes they haven't. The Oakland, was it Oakland, was it Oakland or AC Transit, or whose issue was it in the Bay Area?
Alameda. It is the Alameda County Transportation Authority, which is kind of like the old Los Angeles County Transportation Commission. It was
Okay.
planning and funding, didn't do any operations.
Okay, so what's happened across the state, and there's other places like Ventura County that have never been able to get to that type of supermajority. So what's happened is that for the last 5 or 6 years, there's always been talk in the political world, or the world where we work on motions like Measure J and Measure R, and the idea has always been how to adjust the supermajority. The school bonds have, schools have a 55% supermajority, and everybody else who wants to pass anything due to Proposition 13 has 66 2/3 majority. Now, the unique situation is that with the state assembly and the state senate having a 2/3 majority in both houses, they can take and put a measure on the ballot that would essentially ask the voters, would you like to change the supermajority from 66 2/3 to 55%? It always required a majority in the House, in the Senate and the Assembly, to put it on the ballot. In the past, there was always 1 or 2 Republicans that didn't want to play ball, so nothing could ever go onto the ballot, so the supermajority was protected for a very long time. This is the first time that the supermajority could potentially change. If this actually happens, it would go on the ballot in 2014, the statewide ballot, and the voters only have to pass it by 50% plus 1. It's just to get it on the ballot had always been this 2/3, and we never had 2/3. Now we do, right now. As a matter of fact, the results even came in as late as this past Sunday night. In Republican Lancaster, Palmdale, a Democrat just won the assembly seat there. He'd been behind by 1,000 for like the last month, and all of a sudden on Sunday night, they opened up another pack of ballots, and he was 149 ahead, and he got sworn in on Monday. So it's a real unique thing, because those that are changing, for example, one woman won a state senator. She was the assembly member, and when she won the state senator, then that opens up the assembly seat. And so as everybody moves, there's a couple of state senators that won congressional seats, and so there's openings and closings as everybody, you may not have 2/3 majority, you might have it this week, but in the next month in January, certain people are going to resign because they're going to move on to Congress or whatever. So you won't always have that 2/3 majority in the Senate and the Assembly, but by August, everything should settle in. And if there's this public will to push it forward, then it could go on the ballot in November of 2014. So I hope that's a clear explanation, because we were looking at that on November, the day of the election, when we saw that it was losing, and started doing the research and finally found the people that knew how it all worked. So,
Or a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
The 55% for the school bond issues, did that have to go through the same process?
yes, and it got on the ballot. It was a ballot initiative, I think, in 2000.
Prop
The school.
39 in 2000.
Pardon?
Prop 39 in 2000.
So, Tom is our expert on that. He's the expert on things because he knows all the things I don't know, which is tons. However, the real truth is that I believe it was probably the school constituencies that put Prop 39 on the ballot, and it was it was a state initiative because they couldn't get it through the Assembly and the Senate.
Okay.
But the school world has enough support. They could get, if they needed 2 million signatures, they generally can do it. So that's how that went from 66 to 55%.
If the California House and Senate can't pass it, then it could go through initiative. But that's an expensive, cumbersome process.
Right, but right now the reality here is that the Assembly and the House are well warned that if they start goofing around with things, the Republicans will have openings everywhere and the majority will disappear. but they will do some things that are sensitive. No, I mean, I think they're smart enough to know, you know, it's like, even at Metro, you know, there's things that rile people up unnecessarily, so you have to frame it in particular ways. And in the case of this, politically, I think you'll see it coming in 2013, it'll make it to the ballot 14, and I think especially places like, another article in the newsletter here deals with Ventura County. Ventura County, the transit in most of the state is, there's a law that allows the transit to get funded through a 1/4 cent of the sales tax. And in that, is that correct, Tom? Is that law? It's the mills? Mills?
He was sleeping.
Oh, okay. But anyways, throughout the state, there is a certain amount of money that's collected. Metro gets like $99 million a year from the state of California that subsidize the buses. In Ventura County, when they passed this 20 years ago, Ventura County was a sleepy county, and they decided that because they didn't really have any bus service and they didn't want to fund bus service, they ended up using something like, what was it, $29 million a year to fund roads. Well, there's a constituency in Ventura County that doesn't want to fund Metrolink, doesn't want to fund the local bus service, and they're happy to fund roads and do all sorts of paving. And now, in the last couple of years, the state representatives figured out that they weren't playing fair ball for the transit world, and so the transit commission had been fighting this, but they finally passed some state legislation 2 years ago because the transportation commission didn't play ball. They were told, you figure out a way to fund the buses like you're supposed to, because that's what the law says. You were just given an exemption for a few years. And when they didn't play ball, then they passed the state law, and they've just had hearings in the past month or so, which has resulted in our story in the newsletter, talking about Ventura County is going to get the money that legally is supposed to fund buses. It's going to go there. And now, with some of the Democratic leaders being elected in Ventura County, you might see a tax initiative on the ballot, and possibly as soon as 2014, that would fund local transit and would fund Metrolink, because Metrolink is severely underfunded in Ventura County. So I hope that explains it a little more. All this inside baseball, but that's what we're here for.
Thank you, Don. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Oh, yes, anyway, my name is Manabu Miyoko. Okay, yeah, actually, you know, having this funding has been nice here. But what our goal is for the safety of the passengers. I mean, that's our goal, main goal. Besides having fun, building more, extended railroad.
Just the initial.
Safety is number one for us. You know, we, for the design of new projects, we ensure that, you know, those are safe to open up to the public. For incidents that happen, you know, we had some incidents, some crimes and other things. We always have post-incident meetings with our safety department and the other affected departments to go over the incident, take recordings, video, whatever, lessons learned, action items, to ensure that we learn from things that happen and make sure that we're as safe as we can be. We you know, for the next things that happen here at Metro, we're a very safe agency. I can tell you, I've been around other agencies and the way they operate and their procedures, you know, they're not as tight as here. So I feel very good about the service we deliver. Am I happy with that? No, I always think we could do a lot better. I told my staff I want to win that APTA award every year here. And I can tell you that when I got this position, leaving Metro and coming back and seeing things a little differently, I wanted to change many things very quickly. And we have made a lot of
Hang on a
changes.
second until we get this phone turned on. Put it on vibrate, please.
Yeah, it's fucking turn them off.
We've made a lot of changes with personnel, management teams, et cetera. We've added more safety, finance, rights, et cetera, to the problems that we have on certain rail lines. We have another, we were required by the board to put a task force together, specific for blue line accidents. We put that together, we have a laundry list of other things we want to put out there. But until all that gets approved and all that, we've done many things aside from waiting for board approval.
Yeah, like for
particularly
myself
for the
here,
blue line,
I do oversee the MTA under direction with Zip, and also with John Robert and Lonnie Mitchells, and other, about 20, 30 department, where if I find something, need be attention, they usually have those done like a day or maybe or two to have it done.
Faster than that. No, there's, like I said, we're very proactive on safety. That's a priority for us. It has been a little bit of a culture change on the bus side because on-time performance by the previous CEO was kind of the top thing, I think. So we've been trying to instill the culture that safety comes first, and then everything will fall after that. So we have to be, I went to a rap session with the train operators of the Blue Line, and that division is really unique because operators are really a tight family. They really care about the safety of the railroad, the issues, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the operators said, what are we supposed to do first? Be safe or be on time? And I said, well, safety comes first, but you have to be reliable too. I mean, that's what we're all about. So we have made a lot of progress in making the system safer through training, through extra things out there, through lessons learned, by spending money right now to improve things. So we still have a lot more to do. With the Blue Line, I'll go back to the Blue Line. The majority of our accidents are really not our fault. Okay, we have a lot of illegal left turn accidents on the Washington corridor. Those have gone down in the Long Beach corridor. We've had quite a few, for some reason, a lot of suicides. So, what can we do about those? Well, we try and think of what we can do. More signage, more police monitoring, more education to our staff to identify maybe somebody that's going to jump off the platform or do something. So we don't, if an accident, in most cases, I'd say 99%, we're not at fault. But we still look at all accidents and try and do something to prevent that type of accident from happening. So, with the Blue Line, we put safety ambassadors out there. These are retired train operators or bus operators at specific intersections where the people continue to ignore the lights, the bells, the whistles, and they still cross in front of the train. So we have ambassadors out there in the Blue Line. We've asked the police to monitor certain trouble areas. So we've done a lot of different things. There's a whole laundry list, but I think we still have a lot of things to do, but we're very safe in that. Yes, sir.
Are you doing anything with signal synchronization on the expo line? My observation is there doesn't appear to be any.
Oh, okay. We met with LADOT twice. LADOT is a very good partner for us. Jaime de la Vega, he brings a new vision to our partnership. Before when we asked for priority or preemption, it was a no-no. They would count X amount of vehicles crossing here versus one train, so you're not going to get what you're asking for. So the expo, we did a test, and we simulated preemption and priority signaling. And we came up with a rough figure that we could probably save, I think it was around 8 minutes on travel time. But we also did an analysis of how the system's set up right now, and why is the train stopping at certain intersections. So it was kind of unique because our rules and procedures say that it's a 20-second dwell time at the stations. Now the dwell time is the time that the train enters the station to the time it starts rolling again, after it's opened up and closed the doors. So the initial report and data that we got from LADOT, because they have sensors out there that would trigger the cycle for the train on approach, et cetera, and also release it saying that the train has already gone do that intersection, so let's start the cycle for the cross traffic. So they were showing that we were dwelling 38, 48 seconds at the stations, and we're like, we're shocked, you know, that can't be right. You know, we're not, I'm sure we're not that sloppy with our operations, it's supposed to be 20 seconds. So we had that discussion, we reviewed the information, they have a chart that shows that on a 20-second dwell, if you hit everything right, you could actually go nonstop almost the entire line. That's under ideal conditions. So what we found out when we went out there ourselves and checked the dwell times, we were dwelling appropriately. It was where the sensors were, they were counting the trains for dwell time. They were spaced out quite a bit. So we weren't getting, the information was a little skewed. So a follow-up meeting is going to be held with them, and we're going to try and go back to the table and get some of these intersections better phasing.
Is the goal always to get a green light when the train's ready to go through? Is that the goal? Is that possible?
Well, the way it's set up, and I should have brought the chart maybe next time I'll bring it, but it's set up almost like the blue line on Washington Boulevard. You know, where you approach, if you dwell appropriately, and you keep the train at a certain speed, it should be pretty good trip. But like I said, what we're finding out was where their sensors are at and how they're setting up. We're going to have another follow-up meeting, and we think we're going to get a few more intersections where we're going to get some favorable phasing. We also, with the USC games, we found out that, you know, it can get even worse. So we're looking at two things. One, how would we improve the current phasing for normal operation, and what we would need for these special events that, you know, we have people out of there. I just want to mention that our first season for the USC games, the way we handled that with the pre-planning by Bruce Shelburne and others, quite successful. I mean, we got a lot of good feedback on, we were able to handle the crowds, etc.
How many people rode the trains from the train? 7,000?
7,000, 8,000, 8,000, I should say. So we're very happy with that. I think we only had one accident. That was somebody that, again, made an illegal turn, minor accident. We were very sensitive about the crossing with the campuses where everybody's there, and it's kind of tight there, so we had plenty of people out there, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm so happy that that season went really well. I went to the first game, you know, the ridership was so-so. I went to one of the last games. People are catching on to it. So what we did was myself and Bruce Shelburne, because I work with Muni, they handle the giant games. So we both knew how they operated, so we kind of cloned what they did, and it went really well. Yes?
I noticed that you put some people out to help the people know how to operate the machines for the money, and that's a good help because a lot of times, even though you have a certain amount of people that ride all the time, there's a lot of people that don't ride and don't understand the system. But today the young lady told me that you guys were going to close it down and get some type of other operation.
Well, you know, the first phase of the gate locking was to convert our own TVMs to the tap card. So the people are out there to help the people with the TVMs. Right now our projection is that we're going to start locking the gates, I think, in June. That's the plan.
Have you thought of another type of paying system?
No, ours is going to stay the same. Metrolink and the other agencies need to convert to the tap.
Because being that you were in San Francisco, you know how BART operates with their tickets in order to get in and off. It seems like that's a better system than what the tap system is.
No comments? Well, the TAP project has been a long project, and, you know, one of the issues with the board is, you know, why haven't we locked the gates? So we've got different players on the task force. We made a lot of good progress. Metrolink is on board with what they need to do. They got a new CEO, so they're supposed to be testing their conversion of their TVMs, I think, in February. So they'll actually be converting their machines to pump out the cards that would be able to tap onto our system. So we think it's rolling along quite well.
And would
Yes.
it ever be able to read a smartphone?
You know, we had a meeting, there's a lot of things that we're looking at, how to load the cars through your phone and other options. So we're looking at all those things, so we need to get over the first hump first. Yes.
Hi, I serve on the Metro's Bicycle Roundtable, and we had a meeting last week, and there are always discussions about operations. The Metro and the board and the staff have been very responsive to the needs, I think, of bicyclists, and have been quite successful in making provision for people who want to do the first mile, take their bike on the train, and then do the last mile once they get off the train. But there's good news about that, which is it's been very successful in getting a lot of bicyclists on the train. And then there's bad news, which is that it's been very successful in getting a lot of bicyclists on the trains. And talking about special events and safety, I was going to bring this up to the Metro, the Bicycle Roundtable meeting last week. Like, there wasn't time, so I think I'll go right to the top here and now.
Okay.
And that is where there are special events where a lot of bicyclists show up. And this is the biggest is Sequoia downtown.
Right.
A lot of bicyclists are encouraged by Metrolink and Metro to take Metrolink and Metro to downtown so you can participate in this huge community event. And I did that, usually I bicycle all the way, but I did that on the Metro Red Line for this last one. And that was an experience because the bicyclists were indeed taking advantage of the opportunity, and the cars were full, the aisles were full with bicycles. And so this is a concern, really, in the sense that if something happened and everybody had to get off it quickly, it would be a problem for everybody. It's inconvenient now for bicyclists and everybody, all the other passengers. But if there was a problem, it would be more than inconvenient. There would, it could be serious. And so I'm wondering if Metro has considered in its operations doing something like sort of like what Metrolink does now, and that they have a car where, in their case, the bottom half of it is set aside, opened up for bicyclists. That if you know you're going to have a special event, a lot of bicyclists are there. If you might be able to do something like put an empty car on the end, it's Sunday, the short trains, on the end of the car, and have somebody direct the bicyclist, this is where you go for the special event, and make it easier for everybody.
Those are good ideas. The first step that we took, as you know, is that we made room for the bikes on the
And that's great.
loose seats,
Every
et
day,
cetera,
yeah.
et cetera. It's been such a success that how do we handle it?
Yeah.
And that's been the challenge. That's been the challenge for our sheriffs in saying how can we be safe and have all these folks on board. What we do for that event and other events, that we put extra service out there. We have people out there, and if we don't have enough train cars or whatever, if the resources are there, then we'll throw some more train cars out there. I'll talk to Bruce Shelburne about this because he's totally involved with how we could support these events and.
He's been to several of these bike meetings as well.
Yeah, so we'll see what we can improve on. That feedback is always good because we need to do better the next time the event comes around. As far as having a special train with no seats in it,
I'm not talking about the whole train, I mean one car on the end, because there's Sundays, there's short trains anywhere, there's room, that would have the seats pulled out, and such empty cars could be used for a variety of things, I think, but for that, it would be for bicycles. You'd have somebody on the platform saying, all right, bicyclists, this is the first place you go for a big special event like that, with lots of bicyclists.
Okay. Good. Thank you for the feedback. I'll run it by our people here and see what we can do better next time. And, the best comments and ideas and feedback we get are from employees and others like yourself, so we can think about different things. So sometimes we miss the boat. So thank you for that, and I'll make note of that. Yes, sir.
Okay, hi, my name is Alejandro. I just have 2 questions. One mention about the tap card. I want to know about tourists. How are you going to mention tourist people when you come to visit LA and they want to know about tap card because they're not very familiar here in LA? I want to know how you're going to show them if they, from all over the world to show if they're going to take public transportation. How are you going to put a mention to know that you guys are not going to use tickets anymore and you guys are going to use tap cards? How are you guys going to do just the tap card so they could show the instructions, because most of them don't speak English and most of them speak like foreign language. So how are you going to maintain tourists who come to show how to use the tap cards and like that?
Well, the way we do it right now is, you know, through our website, through signage in the stations. We have people right now there. But we also have push-button telephones right now by each TDF. And those ring direct to the Rail Operations Control Center. And there, somebody would answer the phone and try and help the customer. If they can't communicate or help the person, then they would tell the supervisor in that route to send somebody down there to help them. That's the way we operate right now. Yes, sir.
Also, another way that we just experienced, when you pull up to the machine, it actually sells you the tap card right away at the rail lines. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if the bus operators are still selling it. But
Yes, they are.
okay, so as soon as you pull into the bus or the rail line, you're gonna get it right away.
Yeah, because most of them, like I talk to, they don't speak much English. They don't speak their foreign language, and I have trouble time telling them how to use it because like I talked to one of the tourist people from Germany, and most of them don't speak English. They don't speak English. I have to tell them very carefully how to use it and to use a tap card and everything like that. So
I'm thinking
yeah.
that's something they know they're gonna run into coming to a foreign country. You know?
Right.
So they should, you know, kind of prepare for that.
So one of the things we're trying to do is better inform our customers where they could get help, whether it be trying to buy a tap card or just general help. We have, in all our rail stations, we have these, what we call the passenger telephones, PTELs, emergency telephones and passenger assistance telephones. And those are, again, a direct rate to a 24/7 rail operations control center. So if you go to the station, those are kind of hard to find. They're not labeled and the signage isn't too good. So we're on a campaign to heighten the awareness of all the help that's available by just pushing these buttons. So that's signage at the stations, and also we're going to do some type of marketing and customer information to say, you know, there's assistance just at your fingertip, and here's where you can find those telephones and get immediate help. No, you know, recorded message or anything. Yes.
I think you also need something better with the color coding of the trains, you know, so you can know what direction the train is actually going. If it's the red line, you should see it boldly red. If it's orange, yellow, or whatever it is, it should be boldly so that people will know what train that they need to go on, because it's not like that.
Yeah, the colors of the lines and the, you know, it's a old.
It's like he's saying,
You know, somebody
when you're
made
not
a-
familiar with the train system in the vicinity that you're in, everybody understands color. Now, if you're not knowing which direction and you don't see color, you don't know what to do. I've gotten on the train downstairs that only goes to the purple line, then I have to get off and wait again to get back on for the red line. That's silly. And mainly because the train doesn't show that it's going but so far.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, when I was here, when we opened up the red line, it was just the red line. But I come back and now there's a purple line. So what's that line? That's the leg that goes to Wilshire. So we have been talking about the lines, that how we designate or identify them, a color or possibly maybe a letter. So we're still talking about that. Somebody brought up or recommended a suggestion is that if it's a blue line or red line, whatever color it is, why not have a head sign that displays that color, even though they can't read the message? So I thought that was a pretty good idea. So we put that as something to consider too. Yes, sir.
Yeah. On that note, I grew up in Boston, and every place where a station name appears, it is always like in the exact same. It's white text on the color that the line is. So it's you can just sort of get used to picking that out of the corner of your eye, and you can identify it really easily. Whereas here, I think it's a lot more fractured. Like the signs down in the subway stations just say to North Hollywood without any sort of color on it. So.
Yes. Agreed. Yes, sir.
I want to say that I've been very pleased with the reaction from the new head of TAP, David Sutton, who more or less helped me get temporary cards until I get my defective card replaced with a permanent card. He's been very responsive, even sent me an email that I could post on the rail websites, some of the problems that were posted on one of the rail websites about problems with TAP. He's been very proactive, sending me 2 cards, got the sticker for Easy Pass. This is a compliment, not a complaint or even a question, but just to let you know that he's been very good at reacting when he was at a CAC meeting in the room next door a month ago. He took my information, had his assistant call me the next day, and we got started in getting my defective card at least temporarily fixed up with the temporary card. So that's just a positive comment. You probably don't hear that very much. So
Can we arrange to send Ken $10 for that?
No, he didn't pay me any money.
Well, thank you.
He sent me a card.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to know what can be done to improve late night service on buses.
Okay. What, any particular concern, line, area, or just in general?
Most of them, yeah. Neighborhood street.
Well, name what part of the city.
Midtown, you would just take like the bus on Melrose. Or the 60 through downtown to San Pedro. You can walk faster after 10 p.m.
You want the frequency or how fast the bus goes?
Frequency.
Well, yes.
I know a few years ago you had express trains on the Gold Line. Is there any talk about speeding those up or doing something?
Oh, you're talking about the old bypass the station?
Yeah, I mean, is there anything in that area going on Gold Line or any other line, or not really?
Nothing planned like that.
Was that
for maybe the East Coast person, my experience is that when you run an express train like that, you usually have a track that's in the middle that you could bypass at a high rate of speed. When you don't have that and you're bypassing the station, you have to slow down, because if you're whizzing by there, you could suck somebody underneath the train. So I know we experimented with that. I wasn't around when that was happening. That kind of went to the wayside. So right now, what we're doing at the Gold Line, we do have some more train control improvements that we're going to make. Meaning that the way the signal system was designed and the length of the blocks of the track circuits, we're doing some modifications to that to kind of get the trains moving on a more uninterrupted. So when we get a lot of trains out there, they're not being stopped too far away. So that's an improvement we're making to the Gold Line. What else? We're going to do something else with the Gold Line. I forgot. I'm sorry.
Let me add on to the Gold Line improvements. When the ill-begotten Skip Station project went down, it put big gaps in service to a lot of people at a lot of stations. So in other words, you might have had 7.5-minute service, but all of a sudden, because of those so-called express trains, those that had the misfortune of not being at the right stations were waiting 15 minutes between trains to save about 4 minutes. Well, what ended up happening, the result of that is the end-to-end time originally on the Gold Line was 34 and 35 minutes, and after the whole exercise was done, they were able to speed the Gold Line up to 29 minutes. The Gold Line's overall speed from downtown Los Angeles to Sierra Madre Villa is something like 33 miles an hour, which for light rail is actually very, very fast. It's the second or third speediest light rail line in LA County. The Green Line is the speediest because it doesn't have any grade, it's all grade separated. But you get the perception that the subway is pretty fast, but it's only like 29 miles an hour, and the Gold Line to East LA, not East LA, but to Sierra Madre Villa is like 33 miles an hour. Of course, when East LA came in, it takes the overall speed of the line down because that part of the line is slow running. So that's one of the issues that were there, but they were able to cut out some of the time that way, and hopefully we'll see. That brings me to my question now is, if you've looked at the Blue Line, once it gets down to, I guess it's Wardlow, then it takes like 15 minutes to go 2 miles, really. If there's a way that Metro can work with the city of Long Beach, who's really had a traffic engineer that wants to move cars and not interested in moving trains, if Metro's been working with City of Long Beach to do something to speed up the blue line in Long Beach, because that's an area that's really weak, needs some help.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Bruce Sheldon is working on that. So, yeah, we do need an improvement of how the signals are phased in the Long Beach area. We're still not there. LADOT, what they've done for us in Washington is really, really great. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, regarding for those line there, as I mentioned to Lonnie there, for them, they should run slow down when they're approaching the station, approaching the station there for the safety of the passenger. For example, like we have a lady with the first error and they get caught in, or other type, could be other type of reason. Like I think we had that one drunk person there was on the fell on the track back then. Yeah, I know speed. The danger is would be nice, but sometimes we have to be use cautious at approaching the station.
So we've recently added 10 more positions to the rail operations control center, to the observers that monitor the platform edges and other parts of the rail stations to make sure that if somebody's too close to the edge, they tell them to move back, or if somebody falls off, that we react in a timely manner so that we don't hurt them, or, are we serious?
So these are people that are watching video monitors? That's what these 10 people, they watch in the Rock, they watch video monitors to see that?
Yeah. So, there was certain level of staffing that were watching a lot of screens, so we felt there needed to be some more people to
yeah, there is. I don't know how many personnel they have for monitoring the screen. But with the Sheriff Metro, what I do with one of the lieutenants in the south side there, and we do keep track on that. Well, just one more thing here. Talk about the blue line here. I'm thinking about we have like a bus go from the blue line Washington to the Union Station. Can we do that for like in rush hour time?
To do what now?
Having a bus go from the blue line where the Washington, what's it, Long Beach Boulevard, to the Union Station for during a rush hour.
Yeah, on a bus
Have we done
Washington?
like 2 round trips in the morning and 2 round trips in the afternoon? Can it be possible there?
To clone the blue line service?
Yeah, rather than go all the way blue line to the 7th Street and then go to the 7th Street to Union Station.
Is there no bus service on Alameda?
2 round trip there.
Well,
Yeah, until the.
we don't want to duplicate service.
No,
so
we're not duplicating service here. There's no buses on Alameda between Washington and Union Station.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So that's where that's my suggestion there.
So, Mark, remind me to invite, I think he needs to come and speak to how, what it takes to add more service, what it takes to add a line where we don't have service.
You see how much email I have for 2 years?
That's for what?
Well, it was key check with the MTA and like Lonnie Mitchell, Robert John, and 30 of the other people there.
Okay.
We do keep track. If I find something be done, it usually get done like a day or so.
One thing you might want to touch on is talking about other services that are slow. There's the Orange Line in the San Fernando Valley. The original traffic engineers designed the Orange Line so you could only put 10 buses an hour east and west across the valley because they didn't want to interrupt the north-south car service. And I don't know, at one point I talked to Jaime de la Vega, and he said he was willing to increase the signalization so you could put 15 buses an hour through on the Orange Line. However, it would have to be vetted by the city council office holders to allow that before the poor motorists would have to wait another 20 or 30 seconds for 60 or 80 people on a bus to pass by. So I don't know if any progress has been made or there's possible progress. And there was another issue that you once told me about, so I'll let you go from there on the Orange Line.
So the history on the original opening of the Orange Line was that I guess there were some accidents that happened shortly after it opened. So the reaction to that was to slow the buses down to 10 miles per hour through the intersections for the whole line, so that hopefully we won't have any more accidents. So we looked at the safety record for the Orange Line. It's been really, really good. So our position in Metro is that we would like to increase the speed back up to where it's originally supposed to be on the first part of the Orange Line, and increase the phasing and the speed on the new extension. So that's on our plate to discuss, to get approval, to run it by everybody, to make sure that we can do that without, having more accidents. Since that's happened, there's been a lot of things that our safety department has put out there to enhance the safety, to make sure motorists comply with what's out there. So we're ready to do that, but we need to meet with a few more people to get their concurrence. And LADOT again is they're ready to do it. We just have to get a couple more people on board with changing that. Yes, sir.
Staying on the Orange Line, I know several years ago there was talk about putting 80-foot buses, but they wouldn't do it because they had to go into the streets. But now that the extension's all the way to Chatsworth, is there the possibility of bringing those buses back, especially since the ridership has increased?
80-foot buses, that's new to me, I don't know.
Yeah, it was more than 2 years ago.
There was a 65-foot bus.
Still is.
There are 80-foot bi-articulated buses in common use, mainly in South America, that have been very successful there on totally dedicated busways.
Bear in mind those buses are on 10-kilometer routes, which is 6 miles. But they also pack them so you can have an 80 feet, you have 300 people.
No,
which,
270 is the most.
Oh, okay. So we can only get 270 people in 80 feet.
No more than 270. Which
So,
they could load and unload in 10 seconds. Amazing.
Well, I can just imagine here in a regular 40-foot bus that retranslates to 135 people in a 40-foot, since you had 270 and 80 feet. I think that probably would go well with the public here. I mean, it's bad enough to have way too many people in an elevator going up a few floors, but 135 people in a 40-foot bus might be a little bit more than, it actually means that the line is a rail type capacity line, not a bus line. But if there was an experiment to have an 80-foot bus, then it's still possible since the yard is right off the line there. And, it's a capacity issue right now. But, it's also an acceleration issue. The buses go, what, 0 to 55 in 95 seconds or something like that? So they don't go that fast. So that's one of the issues.
Well, isn't the speed limit on the Orange Line 35 anyway?
What?
Isn't the speed limit on the Orange Line much lower than 55 anyway?
No, you can go up to 55. The acceleration, truthfully, the acceleration, I don't remember what the acceleration the curve is, but
it's a little bit better, but not much. There's only one section where the current Silverliners, Metroliners, can get to 55, because that's the only section where there's more than a mile between stations, and it takes almost 5,000 feet to get to 55 miles an hour with the full load, which doesn't even leave you enough room to brake. So just not possible with that one exception.
So, that gives you slow transit on the Orange Line. If it was light rail, you'd go from from North Hollywood to Canoga Park in about 27 minutes, which would be equivalent of the Gold Line from Pasadena to.
As long as you
downtown.
elevated the light rail, no problem. Otherwise, you're still going through the same damn intersections.
Yeah, but you could get gates.
You have to have
Yes,
gates.
you can
grid.
do that on bus.
Nobody seems to want to though.
Well, maybe that's a question to bring up to Frank.
Now, the
Frank.
interesting thing is, if you go back, now it's 12 years, at the same time that the Orange Line EIR was exposed, Expo had an EIR that was primarily for the same type of thing, BRT. The interesting thing was that on the Expo EIR, it said that buses would be going through the intersections. If they went through intersections at more than 35 miles an hour, they would require crossing gates for safety, rail type, which is a problem because it's harder to signal for a lot of technical reasons. Then you went to the Orange Line EIR that said they were going to go through at 45 and would not need crossing gates. Left hand, right hand. Have you ever met? As it turned out, going through those intersections on the Orange Line at 45 miles an hour, the drivers wouldn't do it. The thing about driving a bus is if your bus is in an accident, you're generally the first one who knows about it. And they wouldn't. Hell, they were they thought that the guideways weren't wide enough. It took quite a while, and that was one of the problems. But they would not consider crossing gates. And again, there's a lot of technical problems getting that to work with bus. It can be done, but at that time, it hadn't been done anywhere in the US. And the other thing was, at that time, there was one busway of that type in the US, and that was in Miami. And that, frankly, was almost a pre-clone of the Orange Line. It was an old, very slightly used freight rail line that paralleled a major roadway with very, very strange intersections that they were going to go through at 45 miles an hour. Their accident rate was unbelievable. And after the second fatality, who happened to be a sheriff's deputy, who was the nephew of a county supervisor, they slowed down to a dead stop, even if it had a green. It was that bad. And that's what MTA was looking at when they opened an Orange Line. This, frankly, goes back to the same problem we had with the Blue Line. I was in charge of safety when that thing opened. The basic problem was you cannot go through at grade a dense urbanized area with very strange intersections at 55 miles an hour. It just was not the proper decision. And MTA has never been able to go back. And they've tried a lot of things, but it is extremely difficult and they don't want to slow down. It is even, I was the first one who suggested 4 quad gates, and that's been put in. But if you go through and look at it, there's a lot of places you cannot put in a 4 quad gate because there's no way for drivers to get caught in the middle to escape. And the people are so dumb, they will not follow signals, and they will consistently put themselves in very, very dangerous positions. And with one exception, every single fatality on the Blue Line, which has been the worst light rail line for fatalities in the U.S. For the first 8 years, it had half of the light rail fatalities in the industry, and it's still, over that period, since it started, it's almost 40%. It just was an improper decision on how that's been designed. Since then, on every other surface light rail line, MTA has been far more cautious, and they have been far, far safer, in large part because PUC also got really burned on the Blue Line, and that they have been very, very careful on approving at-grade crossings of all types because they don't want to duplicate it. And the Orange Line is the same problem, only worse. The thing about light rail, when a light rail vehicle hits a car, very, very seldom are there passengers on the light rail vehicle injured. The people in the car you're often picking up pieces over 500 yards, 500 feet. But if you have a bus that hits a car, that bus will go places. It is not on a track. And a lot of passengers can be injured. And that's what happened the first day of revenue service. And they had this wonderful photo opportunity hauling passengers off of a bus and putting them on this nice, bright orange tarpon as they were hauling them off to the hospital. Nobody was really hurt that bad, but everybody got checked. And the next day it was 10 miles an hour. By the way, that was the main cause of the challenge to the EIR, which MTA lost. That there was going to be a safety problem trying to go through intersections at 45. Can it be speeded up? Yeah, I think it can. But it's going to need more than paint and signs. And the particular problem is people who have never encountered an intersection like that before. Most of the people who live there now know it's there. But you still get some rookies who have never, ever seen an intersection like that before. And when you put up 5 signs for them to look at to warn them, that doesn't help. It confuses them, particularly since all the signs are in English. And this is LA.
What's confusing about the intersection?
You have, first of all, you are, for example, you have one intersection by Valley College. You can be making a right turn. You are not supposed to make a right turn. Why? Because the buses are coming in like this. If you're making a right turn on red, which you cannot do legally there, you are not looking over your shoulder to the right. You're looking that way and you're looking that way. So unfortunately, there's so many nutty intersections along that corridor. And every single one has different types of crazy problems. And again, you cannot solve that by putting up signs and putting paint down on the pavement. You cannot make things foolproof. The fools are too damn ingenious.
You also in Chandler have intersection between 2 intersections. So that's confusing.
Even the expo line on Crenshaw has some strange doings where if you're going northbound on Crenshaw and you want to make a left turn onto the street that's the expo line, the way the intersection is bifurcated, you may not see this point where you need to stop and you end up either on the tracks or in the street, and some of the signage it isn't clear. So if you're not familiar with an area, there's always a risk versus when you know someplace, you know what you've got to do. But segueing that into one of the questions we have is, at the beginning of this budget year, there were more hours put into the rail budget to run late night trains and Friday night and Saturday night trains. Is there any next step coming where there's going to be any boost in midday service or any service changes planned between now and the end of the budget year?
On what?
On rail, increasing either midday service on rail or more night service or any service changes to rail improvements?
Yeah, there's 3 phases of putting out more service on rail on the different lines. We haven't determined which one's going to come first, second, and third. That's in the works.
Is the late night meeting expectation?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think what helped was when we triggered it, right before summer vacation time. And I think our estimate was a 58% jump in ridership during those hours. So, big success. So we're looking at a couple other enhancements to rail service.
Would it make sense to expand it to other weeknights then?
That's what we're planning to do. You know, it takes operators to do that. It takes equipment to be out there longer. And then how do we maintain things when trains are running? So we're trying to be creative. Our CEO really is saying that we need to go for a 24/7 operation sometime in the future and figure out how we can do that and plan for that. So yes, we do have some more services going to be rolling out. We don't know, we haven't determined yet when that's going to happen.
We just had a meeting about that just a couple hours ago.
24/7 rail service?
No, there's 3 more enhancements to the rail service that we're planning for you. That's improving the headways and running a little later on some of the lines, which is Expo and the
Yeah, Frank, the images sometimes that we've seen lately may affect would-be transit riders. New York City's transit stations flooding, the Tokyo collapse in the tunnel. Is Metro taking a front end on that to say that we're pretty good and not going to have those experiences for would-be riders?
I don't think we do a good enough job to say how good we are.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
We've that doesn't sell any newspapers though. It's the things that go wrong that we get interviews with the Times. You know, it's something that's juicy that they want to figure out who's at fault, whatever. So. You know, we look at other properties that have problems. We do a lessons learned. You know, Wamata has a couple of classic accidents that we've had presentations on what happened there. So our safety department, BJ Pawani, very good partner. There was, you know, in my travels to different agencies, we have a very good partnership. So again, we look at our own accidents and incidents and do a lessons learned, but we also look at other properties and get a lessons learned from that. So I can tell you that, you know, our system, with sump pumps and fire detection, heat detection, intrusion, we've got a lot of systems here to keep our riders safe. One more question, then I have to close the midnight train to.
I don't know, this may be too far in the future. What do you plan to do when like the tail tracks at 7th Street Metro Center are going to be out of action because of the regional connector? And how you're going to turn around trains?
Oh God, I was hoping I would get a hard question, but I haven't even looked at that to tell you the truth. I know that we could get Bruce Sheldon to explain that, but I haven't got into that yet.
Like Seattle right now, they're having like they can't run their full 4-car trains ever since their University Link extension started because the tail tracks where they turn around, there's not enough room, so they've had issues trying to run long enough trains to serve the demand, especially during games. So
yeah. We'll have to get somebody to give you the answer. Okay, one more question, something easy like what is today or what is tomorrow? Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I answered your questions. I hope I gave you some more information. I'm going to follow up on a couple of things here that I made note of and give you some feedback so you get some answers that I can answer tonight. Thank you very much.
Just as a note,